Hey internets, there has been a growing trend of a phenomenon that has existed for a very long time. It's honestly existed since communism and socialism has been a thing in any kind of philosophical or historical sense. But it is trending. And the thing is, for communists to do something very dumb and then immediately blame capitalism for it. And so basically they'll come and torch a city or destroy something or whatever, some kind of misbehavior, some kind of epic failure, and then immediately say this is capitalism's fault. And either give a very bad argument for why that's the case, or a lot of times they just don't really give an argument for why that is whatsoever. So in a way, it's kind of a gaslighting tactic. To show you what I mean by this, I'm going to give an example that's been making the rounds. This video clip right here. Now, what you are seeing is that of the Cory Ruiz autonomous zone, and a bunch of people basically making a mess and leaving trash all over the place in Madison, Wisconsin. The autonomous zone has verified ties to the Democratic Socialists of America, no real big surprise there, and the protesters even set up a little communist library filled with standard prog schlop and communist propaganda. Now, the actual protest itself was rooted in the shooting of Cory Ruiz, which current evidence suggests was a classic case of suicide by cop, but that's not really what matters here. The point is that this mess was very much made by socialists, and the evidence of that is very much overwhelming. Nobody really denies that this was yet another leftist attempt at a communist autonomous zone, and so really it's just another classic case of commies taking advantage of a tragedy as an excuse to go into the streets and wreck the place. And people naturally started calling this out. Mainly this post on X right here. That got a good 8.5 million views. From Spencer Pratt saying, "Don't let communists run your city, folks." To which the communists immediately did the meme, blaming their mess on capitalism. And oh, so many of them did this. It's actually kind of shocking. And what's really interesting is the people who are doing this are not just random ex-communist trash posters. A lot of these people are actually well-known socialist and communist tanky influencers. We got Thomas Fazee, Midwestern Marx, Amped Up, Alan McLeod, and many more, including people who didn't necessarily reply to this post, but still replied to the video and tried to make the claim that it is a video of capitalism, such as Jackson Hinkle here pulling his usual China is successful communism grift. And honestly, this is actually kind of hilarious. Because I have said before that socialists tend to be logic blind and that they genuinely do not understand how to use reason to know what is true and what isn't. And this just takes the cake because it is a textbook fallacy of division. An extremely objectively wrong argument where someone assumes that something must have the same trait as the whole group. And that is really all they're doing here. This dumb thing happened in a quote-unquote capitalist country, therefore it is the fault of capitalism. That is legitimately the argument that they're making here. And it's again just something that's objectively wrong to say. There's no debate to be had here. It's like arguing that people should be able to breathe underwater because oxygen is a part of the water molecule, and therefore water is oxygen, and therefore our lungs should just be able to magically work with that somehow. It is an amazingly, stupendously bad argument. It's actually kind of amazing to me that so many communist influencers are parroting this, because anybody with an IQ higher than a pickle could refute it. But to make it clear, I'll just repeat the main problem with Jackson Hinkle's argument that I already refuted, and how he tries to point to the shiny cities in China and say that that's an example of successful communism. There is really no such thing as a capitalist country or a communist country or a socialist country. That is just an oversimplification that people often use to explain the average of their policies. With a capitalist policy being a policy that allows for the privatization of the means of production, free market economic policy, and negative freedom, whereas socialist policies are simply the public ownership of the means of production, interference with the market in order to create that, and positive freedom, or otherwise known as entitlement programs. That is an oversimplification, but it's pretty much where everything goes. But the point is, you can't just simply point to a country and what policies it mostly has, and then use that as a way to analyze what another policy does, while completely ignoring all of the facts about the policy you're actually analyzing. And so it's kind of amazing that all of these socialist and communist influencers are parroting this again, because it shows one of the main problems and one of the main reasons so many people are falling for the socialist grift. Why so many young people think that communism is good? And the reason is because all of these people are just completely lying to them about what socialism actually is. Either that, or all of these socialist influencers have no idea, not even the slightest understanding of the ideology that they are selling. And so it's a classic case of the usual question. Are they genuinely low IQ, or are they grifters who believe that their audience is low IQ? But I believe there's also a third explanation, which is that this strategy is really just simply gaslighting. I think they all kinda know that this is not very good logic. Or at least I hope that they know, because it'd be really sad for them if they didn't. Again, it's not an argument that really takes that much brain power to see through. This idea that America is a quote-unquote capitalist country, and therefore anything that communists do in the quote-unquote capitalist country that doesn't work out or creates a mess or otherwise has bad optics is actually the fault of capitalism, even if 100% of the people involved in the event are members of a socialist party. You do not have to be very smart to see through that one. But the thing is, one thing that communists are very good at doing is nonsensical propaganda. It's not so much about being correct. It's about repeating a lie so much that it becomes true. Because I'm pretty sure at least some of them are fully aware of how the fallacy of division works. I'm pretty sure most of them, especially the context I gave earlier about oxygen and water, most people can just use the fact that no, you can't breathe underwater, and you could just use that to clearly see that this is not very good reasoning. And so I'm sure they fully understand it, but it doesn't really matter to them. What matters is so many people pointing this mess out and saying this is the fault of capitalism. If enough people repeat the lie, then that is what gets recorded. And that is really the grift I think they're trying to go for here. Because the thing is, people who are at fault for a problem have a kind of natural incentive to blame something else for that problem. And this is true for the commies more than any other ideology or standpoint. Because the track record from a historical perspective of communism is a track record of just monumental failure. Communist revolutions and regimes historically always put GDP growth at a standstill, and have caused some of the most deadly and most easily preventable famines, if not for bureaucratic incompetence, that the world has ever seen. And not only that, but once the nation starts adopting more free market policies and removing the socialist regulations, they then immediately see a spike in economic growth. This is not just the case of China, it's the case of just about everywhere. And so because of this, communists, in order to maintain their beliefs, they must blame something else. But because the facts just kinda aren't on their side, this gaslighting tactic becomes their go-to strategy. It just becomes the only thing really left that they can do. Because the average person, the average layman who's just living their life, they don't have time to actually research everything and see what facts are true and what are not. All they see is a whole bunch of people repeating the line that, oh no, these socialists that ruined a city, oh, this is the fault of capitalism. But they don't actually know that it was socialists who did it. The average person just isn't going to immediately have perfect knowledge of what's actually going on. People are not omniscient. People do not know all contexts of all situations. And so the commies have figured out that if they just repeat insane lies, then those lies will be recorded in the minds of the masses as true eventually. It is effectively a strategy of post-truth. And with another element being projection. Not only will they just kind of post this obviously untrue propaganda, but they will also claim that any facts to the contrary are CIA, Mossad, or MI6 or whatever propaganda, even if it's entirely a logic-based argument that can be understood with mathematical reasoning. They do this because they just don't care about truth. It's about instead injecting their narrative of reality into the masses. If the masses did not understand why 1 + 1 does not equal 3, then simply accusing it of being CIA propaganda over and over and over again actually does become an effective strategy of psychological manipulation. And that's exactly what's going on here. We have a very major economic literacy crisis here in the West, along with a very major historical literacy crisis in regards to how communist regimes actually start and how they end, and why certain policies work and why others do not. There is a critical lack of understanding of these things, and so thus this becomes the most effective grift available to the communist influencer. Every bad thing that communists do, simply blame it on something else. It does not matter if it's a lie or not. There's an age-old saying that explains this strategy. We know that they are lying, they know that they are lying, they even know that we know they are lying. We also know that they know we know they are lying too. They of course know that we certainly know they know we know they are lying too as well, but they are still lying. And this comes from Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn, who is a relatively famous ex-communist Soviet dissident who fled the USSR and wrote various books about their crimes when he himself was falsely accused. And if you ever read his books, one of the things that stands out is how he slowly realized that the way that these communist leaders think is not like regular people think. Because to them, truth is less of an objective reality thing and more about what you could strong-arm. To them, integrity isn't really a part of their epistemology, and instead the concept of truth just to them becomes whatever they can get away with declaring to be true. And that's that's why they will say things like this that are false to any informed, rational person. Because informed, rational people are not their target audience. Just like communist leaders of the past, the communist online influencer of today is simply a grifter. And you can tell that it's a grift because they don't apply this reasoning fairly. Going back to Hinkle, for example, Hinkle will of course simp for China and claim that it is an example of successful communism by saying that everything that goes right in China is successful communism, and then of course saying that everything that goes wrong in the United States is the failure of capitalism. But then going back in history during the reign of Mao Zedong, which he did during his reply to me on my refutation of his reasoning, you'll notice that he's perfectly capable of understanding the fallacy of division. He gives various excuses for why Mao Zedong's reign failed, which if you were to actually apply the same fallacy of division that way, he would be forced to say, oh, this happened under communism, therefore communism was at fault. But he of course doesn't do that because he knows that's not a valid argument. But he also knows that his audience probably doesn't know that that's not a valid argument. So he only applies that reasoning when it's to the benefit of the ideology he's selling, which fortunately gives us a hint on how we can deal with the grifters. Which is that I think those of us who are trying to defend the free market from this creeping communism need to do more than just simply refute what they have to say. Because honestly, it's not that difficult to refute what they have to say. I think an additional emphasis really needs to be put on the fact that these communist influencers are genuinely con artists, and anybody who falls for what they're saying is the mark. And if people keep allowing themselves to fall for it, if people keep allowing themselves to be the mark, then the West is going to quickly find itself entering into a post-truth society if we haven't entered into it already. Because this absolutely is going to be the most common strategy employed by communists. As they gain more followers and foot soldiers, they're going to cause problems, and then they're going to blame those problems on capitalism. And that's really the most interesting thing, the key takeaway here on communist gaslighting. This meme here is not in any way an exaggeration. This is exactly, legitimately what they do. That's the tactic. Destroy civilization, blame it on capitalism. The communist cries out in pain as he strikes you. Anyways, that's all I have to say for this video. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. And if you want to support me, you can do so on Ko-Fi, Subscribestar, or by buying some merch. But for now, that is all. Thanks again. Till next time.